Yes, I am.
All right. Welcome. Hey, welcome to this episode of I Declare Love, where we are on a mission to bring logic to love so that smart, ambitious women and the men who love us learn how to love, be loved, and build amazing relationships. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe on YouTube so you can get all of the episodes as they drop. But I am so excited about this episode and this topic because as I have done love engineering over the years, we are excited about the reality that church, for many of us, like I said, we love the Lord. And let me probably preface it in that way, is that I love the Lord. First giving honor to God, all of the good things. And as we get into love, like you can't talk about love without talking about God, and you cannot talk about relationships without talking about the impact of the church. And so as we get into how the church lied about love, I'm so excited to have these men and women of God joining me in the studio, online, and also your insights and comments in the chat. So we're going to get into this because we realize that church and what we learned about church in relationships has impacted the way we see relationships. And so our first guest is Pastor Stebo. Pastor Stebo, who's amazing. And so I'll let him introduce himself and share something. But we're going to talk about it first with Pastor Stebo.
What's up? What's up, Alex?
Hey there. The love engineer. You didn't know we was going to eventually get back around to this point. But yes, tell people a little bit about you, your fly glasses.
I'm just
you been in the church?
nobody. No, but I've been in church all my whole life. Like when I say my whole life, I mean my entire life. I feel like I was literally born into church, but I'm 45 years old. I've been going to church, and active in church about just about as long. And I'm a pastor now. Never thought I'd ever be saying that, but yes, I'm a pastor. Been a pastor for almost 2 years at the Leonard Missionary Baptist Church in St. Louis, Missouri.
Why did you say yes to this topic? I'm just curious. Why did you say yes and commit to come in? Because many people don't think that pastors, tell the truth. People don't usually get to talk to their pastor or any pastor for that matter. So why did you say yes to join? And then we'll get into it, because that's one of the things I appreciate about you is just how real and relevant you are, and that you make God in the church for that matter.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was an interesting topic, to be honest. I thought it was a very interesting topic, a chance to be a little controversial and a little bit, vulnerable. I think that's one of the things that a lot of churches, I'm not going to umbrella it and say the church is missing vulnerability, but I think a lot of the churches are missing out on the key element of vulnerability because, I'm the pastor.
Or any pastor for that matter.
I think a lot of the churches are missing out on the key element of vulnerability because, I'm the pastor.
Or any pastor for that matter.
I think a lot of the churches are missing out on the key element of vulnerability because, I'm the pastor.
Or any pastor for that matter.
I think a lot of the churches are missing out on the key element of vulnerability because, I'm the pastor. I think a lot of the churches are missing out on.
I'm getting a feedback loop as well.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do we have? Let's see. That's got to be because I don't know what that one was, but I heard that too for a second. Or at the end there.
I think we're back. Are we back?
Yeah.
Well, that's just from unmuting myself though, so that shouldn't have done anything. Try it. Test right now.
I
I
think we're
said a
still in
hip,
it. Yeah.
a hippie to the hippie to the hip hop rocking. You
No,
don't
so
stop the rock.
as we are
Bang
talking
bang boogie.
about
Said up
love
jump the
and
boogie.
all of that good stuff,
There we go.
I think we're good
We're
to
good
go.
now.
Yeah.
But and I understand, like I said, and I think that's such a perfect deal. So when as things happen as they do, and like I said, being real, being vulnerable, and also making room for the difficulties, as in technical difficulties that we just experienced here. So I'm glad that you're willing to do that. So let's get into it then. Let's get into
it.
The reality of, I guess the first thing is when you think about myths that you have laid along. So again, you grew up in church all your life. And here you are now. When you think about things that you were taught in church that may be different than what you know now, because one of the big ones, like, we'll just take this idea of purity culture. We'll take this idea of that somehow that if you're good enough, perfect enough, then somehow that will ensure that your relationships or marriages are solid, that God's going to take care of that completely. What were you taught about that? And maybe how
I was never told that, but I can see how some people can get that that notion that once you give your life over to God, He's going to take care of everything. Everything is going to be easy for you, and that's a, like you called it, a myth that should be debunked everywhere, because God never promised that things will be easy because you give your life over to God. Actually, it gets a little bit tougher. If I'm being honest with you, it gets a lot of bit tougher. Just because the things that you want to do necessarily don't agree with the things that you ought to do. If that's making any sense.
Total
I can't
sense.
see you.
Total sense. So then when you think about, then again, like I said, the things you learned about love in the church, give me something again that you later learned, again, that you believed, and then you later learned was different as we go down this path.
To be honest, I don't ever remember hearing about love and relationships in church. You hear love and relationships everywhere but church, actually. It's like kind of like a taboo for some churches and for some men or women of God to talk about love and relationships in church. But if you really look at it, that's where a lot of the deficit is in the church. People that go to church don't really know how to operate. They know how, I'll tell you this, they know how better to act in church than they do in relationships.
Say more about that.
Huh?
Say more about that.
Oh, well, they tell you, okay, don't run in church when everybody know the usher board. If somebody is preaching, you got opening up a text, you have to stand up. You can't come in. You can't walk. But in relationships, they don't tell you, hey, you need to show vulnerability, or you need to communicate more. You need to be a voice in your relationship and not just a voice of your relationship.
Indeed. And more than, like, I remember, again, listening a lot. Again, it was like this notion of, like, it's better to marry than to burn. It was all about, like, what not to do, or this fear factor of, like, marriage was the goal. So again, when we talk about relationships, or at least that's a relationship that I can recall, it's like the ultimate goal for a man or a woman was to get married.
Yeah.
Do you remember hearing?
Have kids, and, live life happily ever after, and God will take care of you. As long as you do things in the right order, then you won't have to worry about blah, 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 blah. Now, like I said, my dad has been my pastor had been my pastor for the majority of my life. He's never preached that kind of gospel. So I can't fully relate to that, but I can empathize, and, like, I get it. I know some friends that have been preached that, and it's like, now that they're in knee deep in a relationship that they have no knowledge of, because they think that God is going to handle everything.
Yeah.
It's not how it goes. God gives us the tools that we need to work the marriage, not just to let the marriage work. It's not just going to work. You
And I
have to
think
work at it.
that,
You have
pastor,
to
is a
cultivate.
big thing. It's like that God, because the church just teaches you to get married
Mhm. It
with the
doesn't teach you.
expectation that God is going to make the marriage work, and happily ever after is just it's a reward of
Mhm.
God. But I think that's so good. What you just said is like, you have to cultivate.
Yeah. If you look back in Genesis, and I know you told me, I don't want to talk to the pastor, but I can't help it sometimes.
Go
After being
ahead.
in church for 45 years, all I hear is preaching. So, but if you look back in Genesis, God told Adam that you're gonna have to work at the ground. The ground is gonna oppose you. So if you look at how, okay, let me ask you a question. What gender is the earth?
Female.
Female, Mother Earth,
Mother
all that
Earth.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So what that is a likening to is, okay, Adam, you have the land, the woman, but you still have to till the ground. You
Ooh.
still have to fight the ground. You still have to cultivate it, and you have to make the ground what you need it to be in order to get it to grow what you need to grow. And a lot of men don't like to fight the ground. They want the ground to be ready for whatever's okay. Look, I don't even want to plant anything at this point. When I get into the relationship, you should already be growing whatever I need. And that's not how it works.
And I wanted, again, as a love engineer, again, who brings logic to love, and also does not support violence on any level. So you ain't got to fight a woman, fellas. So that is not what pastor's saying, or woman. That's just not it. So again, you don't have to fight them, but this notion that you may have to cultivate a relationship for sure, that you may have to plant. Or more than that, understand that whatever you plant is coming up in there. So be that the words you speak. So we are always cultivating and planting. The question is, what am I producing? What are the seeds of that? And so every interaction is a seed I'm planting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to, whatever it takes for whatever you want to get, you have to be an agent of it. You have to be, okay, well, if I want apples, I'm not going to go out and buy orange seeds and then get mad at the ground for growing growing things that make oranges. You have to take ownership of a relationship as a man and as a woman. I mean, I've heard women say, well, I'm not going to I shouldn't have to tell you what I need. You should just innately know. You've been in a relationship before. Yeah, I have been in relationships before, but I've never been in a relationship with you.
Ooh.
So if you don't want me to treat you just like any other woman, then you need to show me, hey, look, this may have worked in a different relationship, but let's talk about what works for me.
Yeah. And that agency, or just that fact that, again, that you are supposed to learn. Again, the church didn't teach that. It was this expectation almost that you should just know if you love God.
Mm-hmm.
On both sides, right? On both sides. So then so as we talk about ownership, so speaking of, as we talk about the Bible, probably one of the most misused scriptures is this notion or this myth that submission means obedience. And particularly just from the woman. So let's talk about how has supported.
I'll say this: submission does not mean obedience.
Say more.
I mean okay. Try to be submissive and disobedient at the same time. It's impossible.
Say more.
You can't submit and disobey at the same time.
So for you, submission and obedience are identical.
It's not identical, but they are related.
Okay.
They're closely related. They're knitted together. I can't submit to my wife and be disobedient. I can't submit to an authority and be disobedient at the same time. Yep. Two things can't exist. Those two things can't exist at the same time because they operate in opposition to each other. Disobedience and submission. Submission, if you break that word down, sub means to go below, and mit is from the word mission. So you have to put yourself below the mission for it to work. And if I'm always above the mission, if I'm first before the mission is, then how am I going to submit? How do you say I'm going to submit to something that I'm above?
How do men submit in relationships? So you mentioned it's submission to your wife, because I think that's the biggest myth, is that it's often just preached to women, and as a result has often fostered a lot of abuse by women at the hands of men, because she believes she's obeying God or obey it. Because what you're saying is exactly how it's often preached and understood, this notion that there is an obedience factor, but more than that, it's an obedience to God, but that usually means the submission to abuse, and churches have supported that. And I have personally seen that under the name of God or submission.
Now, it's kind of tricky. First of all, I just saw my dad come in the chat, so shout out to Bishop Thompson.
Hey, Bishop.
What's up? I always call him the GOAT. If the Apostle Paul had a favorite preacher, it would be that man right there.
Yeah.
But I am, because he is and was. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Bishop. All right, so and my mom. What's up, Mama?
Hey, Mama.
Supreme Elect Lady Merlene Thompson. Real quick diversion. They've been the pastor and first lady of the church that I'm now pastor for 33 and a half years. So shout out to them. But to go back to what we were talking about as far as submission,
from the men Bible particularly, I'm literally just understanding, how do men submit in relationships is what I'm trying to, because the Bible tells us.
Bible tells the woman to submit.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible tells the man to love.
Mm-hmm.
So if you love your wife like Christ loved the church, then the woman shouldn't have a problem submitting, because it is not Christ's love is not of an abusive nature.
Yeah.
So the problem comes when we become attached or connected to the wrong mate.
Mm-hmm.
You can't expect biblical principles from someone that doesn't believe the Bible.
Yes.
So you're trying to now that kind of wielding power in the wrong hands, and that man that doesn't believe in the Bible that says, well, your pastor say submit to me. And you put yourself in a precarious position as a woman, because now you have to obey the Bible. You're not obeying the man per se. You're not submitting to the man. You're submitting to the mission. You're putting yourself below the mission, and the man just happens to be the head of that mission. So you have to be careful of who you connect with or who you attach yourself with.
So so that's fair. So to that point, so then that takes me down another path that often gets brought up, which is the notion of being equally yoked. Can you define what that looks like? Because I think that's also another thing that has been misunderstood and, frankly, lied about in church, because this notion of equally yoked being he just go to church with you, and then therefore you got to follow all the rest of the things. How would you define that? Because I think that is another one that has caused so much pain and damage in relationships.
I don't think that has been lied about. It may have been not fully explained.
Okay.
Because you do need someone of a like mind for anything to move forward.
Right.
Now, like mind doesn't mean that you think the way that I think. The like mind means that, okay, what's the goal here?
The values are the same. The goals are the same. Yeah.
Right. So if the goal is to go from point A to point B and not from point Y to point Z, then we're both we're in the same mind frame. Now, there are different ways to get from point A to point B, and that's up to you and I to talk about if we're in a relationship. Now, also, equally yoked means Where are so it's derived from ox, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ox has a yoke on them,
Right.
so it's usually um a two oxen yoke. So one on this side, one on that side, and they're pulling whatever needs to be pulled, whether it be something to till the ground with or whatever. The point is you have to make sure that they're even
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in strength and in weakness. So I'm not going to pair my weakness with someone on the same, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like if both of us are horrible at cleaning up, and I'm just using an extreme circumstance. I know cleanliness is not one of the requirements for being married. Don't take my
I was like, Pastor, you about to have this whole thing. Go ahead.
Right. So like let me be a little bit more
Let's bring
clear.
it in.
So if I'm good with money, you're not. I'm not going to put that burden on you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take, okay, look, I'm better with money. You're better with XYZ. I don't want to get into too much of a gender role or whatever. We go down that windpipe. But I'm going to, okay, look, in order for us to get from point A to point B, I'm probably going to be, I'm probably going to take care of the money aspect. You're better with, I don't know,
anything
I don't know
else.
what anything. And for me to be not able to cook and me be responsible for all the food being cooked is crazy. It's wild. It doesn't make sense at all. For me to have a problem with overspending would be crazy for me to be the financial guru in the relationship.
So you're saying that the miss is complementary skills and
it's
support
complementary
to be able
to whatever is going to pull us forward. That's or pull what we're trying to pull forward. If we're trying to move this relationship forward, then me being on the wrong side of the yoke is unequally yoked. Even if we do both believe in God and we both going to church and all that kind of good stuff, if we're not placed in the right, sometimes unequally yoked doesn't mean, okay, well, I can't be with you anymore. Sometimes that means, okay, maybe we need to figure out our positions.
Oh, I love that.
I'm good on my right foot. You good on your left foot. So let's go that way. And let's pull that way. So both our strengths are opposite of each other.
Yeah, let's walk this together. No, that makes total sense, because I think that I love the point where you're like, it doesn't mean that we're not supposed to be together. I think another thing that, as we take, kind of this final part, this has been good. But this notion that you're supposed to stay forever, that you can't leave if it's not working well, that if it's bad, right? So that's the better or for worse. And this is back to, again, and I think I keep landing on abuse just because, again, the number of women that have been encouraged in the church to stay in abusive relationships based on the idea that it's for better or worse.
Okay, this is how I feel about it. When you say, I'm getting married, the misguided notion is you can do with marriage as you've done with all of your other relationships. No, you can't. What's the purpose of marriage being special if you could treat it like any other relationship that you've been in?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's better to do, it's important, let me say, to do some groundwork at the beginning before you say I do.
No, absolutely.
If you're gonna go in a marriage and halfway do it, then don't get married.
No, that's absolutely fair. And if you get in it and you find that it is abusive or it's not what you anticipate, know that God doesn't require you to stay in it to just prove that point out. Because, again, being abused, all of those things, again, like I said, that does not get you more. Because you're right, because many people make that mistake where they didn't properly vet the person and God wasn't in it to begin with.
And another thing, God doesn't want you to suffer. He doesn't want you to suffer. That's why he gives you the signs before you say I do. And a lot of us ignore the signs and get mad at the highway. You can't do that. You can't get mad at the highway because you ignored the signs. Oh, this highway goes on forever and ever, and I can never get off. Well, you shouldn't. Number one, you should have never got on the highway to begin with. This isn't your highway. Just because you have access to it doesn't mean that you should access it.
Oh, that's good, Pastor. That's a whole word right there. Say that again. Let's run that back.
Just because you have access to it doesn't mean that you should access it. I mean, the relationships are, prior to marriage, relationships are highways that have exits that you can take. And before you get into that relationship, there are signs. God gives us signs like, hey, this is not. And what a lot of us do is we try to be.
We make our own signs.
We try to be construction workers and try to change the highway.
No.
And then get mad because it's not yielding to it. Nobody likes to be changed, and you're not going to change anybody just from saying I do. And they're going to be that same person, and it's God doesn't put us into something without now he'll let us do what we want to do because we have a permissive will, but he's not just going to let you go into it, not giving you some kind of warning. Don't do this. You see this. And what we do is, since we like what we see, I just talked about this Sunday, since we like what we see, we don't necessarily blind ourselves. We just turn off the signs. Because I like what I'm seeing. I just don't like the signs that's telling me not to do this because I want to do this. This person checks every other box. He's tall, dark, handsome. He got his own money. And a lot of times money is the main attribute that we go after. But I'm not going to go that far. Because the
church tells you to find a provider. That's what they preach to these young women and older women and all this. You got to be a provider. So there's misunderstandings that are had, to your point, because again, there's no context. It's just direction. He got to be a provider. Mm-hmm. Adam had a whole field. Adam was working. That's the way that's preached. Mm-hmm. At times that give people, to your point, this misunderstanding. And sometimes I love this.
But one thing that's not preached is when Adam saw her, she was a suitable mate. Meaning, what I lack, she has. What she lacks, I have. You suit me. You fit me.
We compliment.
Not just because you're a provider. You could be providing for a whole bunch of people. That don't mean that, okay, well, now that he's providing for us 4 women, we should all marry him.
We should not all marry him. No, it's real. That's real.
I mean, like you wouldn't marry a man that 3 women was lined up to marry just because he was a provider.
Well, Cinderella had one man had a whole bunch of women lined up to marry him, and somehow, some way. So again,
but also Cinderella, they lived happily ever after. How many of those you see?
We don't know what the day after the wedding was. We only see it to the wedding day. So you don't know that. And I think there is some elements to that point you just made. And as we close up this segment, like I said, it's this notion of we only get to the wedding as opposed to an amazing marriage. Mm-hmm. And the church also preaches to wedding too. It's get married, which requires a wedding. Mm-hmm. But the happily married part, have an amazing marriage part, is unclear. And I think that, and even as we've been having this exchange, I think that we both agree on there. It was like getting married is what the fairy tales, and unfortunately sometimes what the church led people to get married, but not.
And a lot of churches, married is the end goal. That's the end goal. And it's like, okay, once you get here,
you're on your own.
I mean, we don't say happily ever after in church, but
it's get married.
It's the same.
It's principle. Get married. Just get married again, so you don't burn. Get married so you don't fornicate. Get married. So all these reasons, but the goal is marriage.
Yeah, and like I said, I have to pen flowers that's not what I was taught in church. I can't say, yeah, man, because that,
What were you
I
taught?
get it.
And then we'll wrap this up. What were you taught? The goal was,
I was
and you had
taught
a beautiful,
that
your parents
I
were
was
beautiful.
taught that my previous pastor, my dad, was very open about, okay, marriage takes work. When you say I do, that's the beginning. That's just the beginning. It sometimes, and he used this analogy, for Jesus's first miracle, sometimes the wine is going to run out. But you got to know what to do when the wine runs out.
How to turn. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we got Pastor Stebo. This episode, as we bring up, so we'll have a couple that's going to join us on this next segment of How the Church Lied About Love to talk about, again, marriage from this standpoint, because I think your perspective is really solid and really, really helpful, again, to help you understand. It's like, if nothing else, it's like what we're taking away is that getting married is the beginning. The wedding is the beginning. The rest of it is the work and the skills that you have to do to go forward from there. So
there's work at the beginning too.
Huh?
There's work before the wedding too.
There's work, right? Don't get on no highways that you don't supposed to have access to, and don't change the signs. That's the other other things as we get into these relationships. Like, don't change the signs, don't get on the highway, and then know that the wedding is the beginning. God will support you, but God won't do the work. Do we capture that message right?
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, appreciate your time. Where can people find you? Where can people connect with you after this point? Like, so I feel like we got to do this again.
Oh yeah, I'm my mama. So you can hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pastor Stebo, Pastor_Stebo on any of those platforms. You can worship with us at the new LMBC.TV, where we be worshiping God it'd be a real church day almost every Sunday. But yeah, come and join us. And you can even come down and visit us in person, LMBC at 1100 North Compton in St. Louis, Missouri, 63106. Come and visit us on the scene or check us out on the screen.
Love it. Thank you so much, Pastor Stebo, for joining us. And as we always say, grow in love.
Grow in love.
All right, guys. So that's actually going to be the end of part 1. We ended up going long. What can I say? We're having good episodes, and we had a great time with Pastor Stebo, and likewise for Jovonta and Symone Patton. They were great as well. So that's in part 2. So thank you for listening, and make sure you check out part 2. Don't want to miss that.
MBC. No relation to NBC.